Okay, so what is a method? A method is a function, yes. And you'll hear me say function sometimes when I'm talking about Ruby and when I should say method. So in different languages we use different words to describe this thing. And so just forgive me if I say function when I should say method, or I say method when I should say function. They're the same thing. A method or a function is just a named block of code. That's all it is. We create a block of code, we give it a name so that we can refer to it. So we can call it from multiple places. And this allows us to write code once. So we can write this block of code once, give it a name, and then we just refer to that name when we want to execute that same block of code. Okay? So it gives us a way to make our code dry. What does dry stand for? Don't repeat yourself. And that is a best practice in programming. It's an important one. Why is it important that we don't repeat ourselves? Why does it matter? Is it just because we don't want long, ugly code? Why? Somebody tell me a reason why our code should be dry. Say again? More efficient? Yeah, so it can be more efficient. It takes less time, right, to write this code, but not just that. Huh?
When it's put it down, like when you run it, will it slow it down, or because it's actually referencing the...
It may slightly slow it down. Yep, that's not my top concern. What's more important than that? Why is it bad to have repeated code?
Makes it sloppy.
It makes it sloppy for sure.
You want to make a change.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to make a change, what's the problem then?
Change everywhere that you put the code.
You have to change it everywhere you put the code. And then you might mess up because you're a human being. And not only that, but you might forget that you had it in this other place. And besides that, now you've got to test the same piece of code multiple times in different places. And so it makes it less maintainable when you have repeated code. So it's harder to maintain. If you want to make a change to it, you've got to change it in multiple places. You have to remember all the places you've got it. And sometimes all the places you've got it are in separate code streams. And so you've got to make changes in separate code streams. And then you want your code to be dry so that it's more easily testable. Because if the code only lives in one place, you only have to test it in one place. You don't have to test it in 5 different places. Okay? So really, really important. If you ever catch yourself writing the same, if it's more than one line, and even sometimes if it's one line, okay? But definitely if it's more than one line of code, and you find yourself typing it more than once in one project, it's time to have a method. Okay? It's time to define a method. So a method may or may not take some input, okay, as parameters. And it always produces an output. That output might be nil, but it always produces an output. Okay? Okay, so what is the syntax in Ruby?
Wrong door, mate.
Yeah, you should come to the other door. There you go.
Thanks.
What's the syntax in Ruby to define a method? Well, it looks like this, and I thought I changed this. Ooh, I did, but I think I'm referring to it in the wrong place. Hang on a second, guys. Just hang. Yep, hang on just a moment, please. You have to type it right. Hold on, there's a technical difficulty.
Well, I looked into it. I haven't seen it maybe in like 5 years.
All good. I'm not sure why that's not working.
Speaking of things not working.
Huh? What's?
I don't know. Seems like you have accepted an invite to the.
Ah.
You can't see the private one that is.
Right. Right.
She's all the other one, but not that one.
Not that one.
Yeah, it says private next to it on mine.
Okay, I think it's because I linked to the one in the fast track lesson slides, which is not what I meant to do. I think that's the problem. So that's what I'm trying to sort right now. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me for just a moment. Okay. Oh, I know why. I know why. I know why. Hold on.
The problem is they're only foreign they may have resistance to it and they may not realize it happened. Is the same ring with
Okay, I'm gonna fix this for later. I think I need to wait until GitHub publishes this for me. Or actually, yeah, I think I need to wait till GitHub publishes it. And I think I need to push this up.
yeah. Oh wait, no, I see. So this is actually use the muscle. That's hilarious.
Yeah, well,
that's it. I'm just saying, advanced stuff. Do you want to get the gel?
Oh, do you guys remember what I have to do here? You're not paying attention to me. It's okay. You don't have to.
You put your feet there, I see it across my line, man.
There is no way.
Yes, it is. Nah, we made the bottom yellow as well. That's a joke. No, the bottom yellow.
Okay, I'm just gonna use this for the moment, and then I'll make sure it's fixed for the next one. This probably isn't gonna work. Oh. Okay. All right, yay. See if you can see it now. Sam?
Yeah.
See if you can see it now. If you go click on it now. No? It doesn't work still?
No.
No? Now it's in this repo. Why isn't that working? Oh, so you can't see the repo at all?
No. I can see all of it.
Who can anybody see this repo? This repo?
Yeah.
Yes?
Use the link in Slack.
Here, let me give you a different link. If you use the link in Slack, but you don't see the repo at all, Sam?
It's the other one he doesn't see. Like it says private next to it.
It does say private, but you should have access to it.
I'm gonna try clicking the link from Slack. Yeah, it gives me a oracle.
No, the one from Slack isn't going to work. Let me give you another one from Slack. Hang on. Okay, try this one.
I can see that.
Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so, because I'd updated these slides to use the right kind of casing. Okay, so this is the syntax for a Ruby method. We use the def keyword, which is like define. We give the method a name. If there are any parameters, we would specify those here. We'll see that in a minute. Doesn't have to have parameters. We end the method with the end keyword like we do with everything in Ruby, right? And what goes between the def and the end is the block of code that will execute whenever this method is called, right? So here's an example where we are doing what? What are we doing in this code?
Printing 2 lines.
Just printing 2 lines. Yep, some parrot facts. I don't know if those facts are true. I'm going to take for granted that they're facts. I didn't look them up myself. So the last message on here says that just because you declare, so this is called a method declaration. We're declaring the method does not mean that the code executes. When does the code execute?
When you call it.
When you call it. So just having it there in your, some people get confused because they define a method and then they run their program and the method doesn't execute. And they're like, I don't know what I've done wrong. My syntax is right. But they're not calling the method. So you have to call the method in order for the method to execute. Right? Now, if your method prints something and you call it, you should see what it prints. If your method doesn't print anything, it just returns something, you're not going to see anything necessarily when you call that method. Okay? So let's look at an example of that, because I think this also causes confusion. So say, for example, let me just open an empty file here. Ooh, this was a fun challenge here. Another day. Okay. So if I, for example, define a method that called called sum, and let's just say it's going to be super simple. It's not even going to take input at this point. I'm just going to say this method adds 3 and 2 and returns the sum. Okay, how would I write that? Anybody?
Sum equals 3 plus 2.
I could say sum equals. Now I'm not going to say sum equals because I named my method sum, and that would be bad, I think.
Num equals?
Num equals
3 plus 2.
3 plus 2, and then what should I do if I say it returns the sum? What do I need?
You need a put.
Now, you don't need a puts. What's the difference? What would a puts do?
Print.
Print it. Would it return it? What does a puts return? Anybody? Nope. Puts returns nil. Every time.
I'm taking it as values.
Nope. Puts returns nil. Puts prints whatever you tell it to print, but it returns nil. Okay? So if I did, now I don't in Ruby, I don't explicitly have to put the return here. I could just say num equals 3 plus 2 and it would return 5. I hate that. So, but that's because the way that Ruby is made, it implicitly returns the last thing evaluated. The last block of code that was executed, whatever that evaluates to, whatever that returns is what the method returns. I like an explicit return in my methods. Call me old school, old fashioned. I like an explicit return in my methods. Almost every other language requires you to explicitly return something. Okay? So I like an explicit return. Now, what's going to happen if I run this file?
Well, you haven't called it.
I haven't even called it, so nothing, absolutely nothing's going to happen. Let's just convince ourselves that that's true. I can't remember how to do this. Yep, that's it. All right. So here's my little terminal down here, and I'm going to call Ruby methods.rb, and it's like, yep, all right. And I'll print the. That was the wrong thing. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to show you something. Not that. Okay, if I call it and I echo $question. Does anybody know what echo $question does? This is a bashy thing. A bashy thing. Do you remember, Jack?
It returns.
Prints.
Yeah, it prints the return of whatever you call it, right?
The last thing. It prints the most recent return code.
Yeah. Could have told us that before I kept checking all these poof checklists.
So very handy in Bash. Echo $question prints the return code of the last thing you ran. Okay? $question gives you the return code of the last thing that was run in shell. Okay? So it returned to 0.
Is that saved to standard out, like to return out, so then you can actually reuse that?
You could reuse it.
Yeah.
So $question you can use however you want. It's a shell variable that's available for you to use.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen if I call sum? So I'm just going to call sum. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to call it. Still didn't print anything. Why?
You haven't got a put.
Yeah, I'm not printing anything. Well, let's echo $question. It returns 0. So even though sum is called here, that's interesting to me because I would expect it to return 5. All right, let's try this. What do I have to add here to see what's actually happening? Let's just see if it actually does print 5. It still returns 0. I think it's just returning whether or not the program ran successfully. That's what it's doing. So, yeah, it is, because I'm calling Ruby methods, and so that call executed successfully and returned 0. If I said instead Ruby one, okay? So it's telling me about the success of that last call in this case. All right, anyway, when I call it now, let me just clear this. Why does it print 5? Why?
Because you told it to print the result.
I told it to print. I said puts, and I called the method. The method returns 5. Puts prints what that method returns. Okay? All right. So to call a method, we just type the method name, and that's going to call the method. And it'll execute the code in the method, and then it'll return back to where you were in the program. So for example, if after this call to sum here, I said, okay, what's actually happening when this executes? So what am I going to see when I run it?
5 and then we'll go.
That's right. So where is the, if I had a pointer pointing to the line of code that's being executed, where would it start? Where would that pointer start? Which line number?
Starts at 2.
It doesn't start at 2.
Starts
Start
at
at
3.
7.
It starts at 7. Starts at 7. It actually reads the function. So it does, to be completely accurate, it does start at 2, Vicki. You're right. It starts at 2 and it reads, this is a method declaration because it sees def. And then it skips to the end. Okay? It finds the end and then it looks for the next line of code. And so then it starts executing on line 7. And then what does it do? Where does the pointer go?
We'll go to line 3.
Yeah, it goes to line 3. It actually goes probably back to line 2. And then to line 3.
Right.
And then it executes line 3 and 4 and it gets to the end. And then where does the execution pointer go? Then it goes on to the next line after it returns. Now when it returns, it's going to return a value. It actually comes back to 7, doesn't it? Because then it has to print the value that came back. And then it goes to line 8. So a program doesn't execute linearly from top to bottom. Sometimes it does if there are no methods in it. But most of the time our code has methods in it. So when we have methods defined, we're calling those methods, the execution pointer is jumping around. So it jumps to that method when we call one, executes the code in that method, brings the return back to the line that called it, completes execution of that line, and then goes on to the next line. Okay, so if we write a method, who wants to do this and share their screen? Write a method that outputs a sentence and call that method 3 times. Who wants to do that? Anybody in here can do that. Everybody in here can do that.
What about the file trackers?
You could, but will a Gentecher volunteer? You can do this. Or be chosen.
I
Yes.
like the name in the hat method.
Name in the hat?
I'm
Yeah.
trying to push it with Matt.
Thinking of a number between
No,
1
that's
and 5.
that's a good idea. Name in a hat, though. I do need to make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
You could write a program for that.
We could write a program
We
for
could put
that.
everyone in an array and put dot shuffle.
Yeah, we get later.
Yes.
Leo would be so excited.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every
We can do that. Who
That's
wants
a holiday
to?
project.
Who wants
Leo,
to?
Leo,
Who
Leo.
wants to write me? Who wants to write me a simple method this afternoon that if I give you the array of names that I call it and gives me a shuffled name. Yeah, Carly. All right, cool. Thank you.
Just put it in Slack, Leo, or something.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sure, we've
Awesome.
already done it.
You'll end
Yeah.
up with 6 arrays.
Okay, so for now, Jai, will you give it a go? Write a method that prints just prints a sentence. You can write a method that prints a sentence. You can do it. Come on, we'll walk you through it. We'll do it together. You can do it. I believe in you. Will you join the meeting if you're not in here?
Yeah, I'll join this in 1 second. Slack.
Yes. Do you want me to paste it again? I think it's in everyone.
Yeah, I'll say.
Okay.
Present your entire screen.
Yeah. Okay, so the first part is just to write a method that prints a sentence. And you can pick the sentence or you can ask somebody to give you a sentence. So what's the first part? How do we declare a method? Exactly. Yep.
What do you want me to do?
All right. Now, inside of this method, we're just going to print a sentence. So, yeah. Somebody want to volunteer a sentence for Jai?
Happy day.
Happy days. All right.
Nice.
We're just going to do a simple one now. We'll just do a simple print a sentence. Okay, so how do we end this method declaration? Yeah. Now we want to call that method 3 times so that it prints the sentence 3 times.
So sentence, print, put sentence, put sentence, put sentence.
You don't even have to say puts. Why don't you have to say puts?
It's already in there.
Oh,
Yes.
it's a puts in the function.
That's right.
Just like that.
Yeah.
You don't need the brackets. I did it.
Okay.
Huh?
And then just run it out.
Yeah. Nice. Perfect. Well done. Thank you. All right. So, how would somebody else do the same thing? Are there different ways to do it? Yep. Aiden? Oh, you mean passing an argument? Okay, but if we weren't going to, yeah, so you could pass an argument and then you could print that. You could do that. What do you have, Jack?
I did the define method puts the sentence and an end, and then I just put 3 times with the name of the method in curly brackets.
Right, right. So something like this?
Yep. No, I just put big up and then a curly bracket. I didn't put any.
Oh, right. Okay, you did it with a block.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was with the name of the sentence.
Like this?
Yep.
And that works too. And that's a nice use of blocks there. We haven't talked about blocks yet, but what's the alternate syntax, somebody, with the do in the end? What's the alternate syntax? Mm-hmm. Like this. Does exactly the same thing. Okay? But the block syntax is nice when you only have one line of code that you're executing in a particular block, whether that block's a loop, or it's generally a loop. It's different kind of, there might be a map loop or some other kind of loop, but it's usually a loop. Okay, good stuff. Thank you for that. Now, a method can take parameters. They're called parameters, input parameters. You might hear it called inputs. And that gets confusing to people because I might say write a method that takes as input these values. And that might make you think I need to ask for user input. That's not what I mean. When I say input to a method, I'm really talking about parameters. So a lot of people will use those terms interchangeably. Input, method parameters. Okay? The parameters are what goes after the method name, and they are input to the method. So when you have parameters to a method, it's because that method needs a piece of information or pieces of information in order to execute the block of code that it executes, that you've defined in that method. So it's a way for us to pass information from our program to our method. So we define any parameters in parentheses after the method name, and then we can access those parameters inside the method. Now this is important in Ruby because in Ruby, variables only have local scope by default. Okay, we haven't really talked about scope yet, but if, for example, I have a program so let's say I wanted to print I wanted somebody to pass in the sentence to print. Okay. And I said, we'll call that, what do we call it? I'm going to say words. And instead of printing something, a literal string, what would I say here instead? Yep. Puts words. Okay? Now, let's say, for example, in my program, I said, my day equals it's a happy day. Now, I could not refer to my day in here. Who's surprised by that? Do you see what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to access this variable
It's outside of the method.
that's outside of the method in my program, inside of the method. Some languages you can do that. It depends on the scope of the variables. And in Ruby, when you declare a variable just like that, it does not have global scope. What that means is any methods can't see that variable. Now, one way you can deal with this is to make your variable global. You can do that in Ruby with a $sign. Put a $sign in front of my day. Everybody can see it. It's everybody's friend. It just gets around. Everybody's got access to my day when it's got a $sign in front of it. That is not a good thing to do. You don't want loose variables hanging around. It's just untidy. Okay? So the reason that global variables are bad is because those can be updated from anywhere in your program. All right? And that means that you can accidentally update it in a place that you didn't mean to or without considering the consequences. So the best practice is to not use global variables and pass your variables around. Keep it between friends. Don't just like leave them out there for anybody to access. You know? You want to know and trust the person that you're passing your variable to.
This conversation is better
So that's how we use method parameters. Okay? So we would pass my day to here, but the reason that we don't use the same variable name is not to confuse ourselves. We could say this, all right? And this my day is a different variable than this my day. But that's confusing, isn't it? So we might call it words here and words here. And then how would we call this method if we wanted it to print my day? Yeah, Aiden?
Words. My day.
Yeah. So that's how I pass information, the information being what's stored in the variable my day, to my method sentence, so it has access to that and can use it. Okay?
How does that access it?
So when I call sentence, I'm passing my variable, my day, as an input parameter. It comes into sentence as what? What parameter name?
Words.
Words. And then inside of the sentence method, I can access words because it's been passed to me explicitly as an input parameter. But what's been passed actually is my day from my main program. So it's a way for me to communicate information from my main program to my method. Okay? And that's the convention we should be following when we code, using local variables, local scoped variables, and using parameters to pass the information around. All right, so let's make sure that that does what we think it does. What do we think it does? Oh, I must not have saved it. Hang on. Yeah. Okay? Now, how many parameters can I pass to a method? Can I only pass one? there's probably a limit, but it's going to be a limit bigger than any you should ever use, so don't worry about the answer to that question. You should not be passing 300 parameters to your methods. If you are,
250 characters.
it's 250 characters.
255 characters.
255 characters. So if it needs to be bigger than that, then do it differently. Okay. How about if we wanted to print it a certain number of times inside of this method? Then how could I implement this method? If I wanted to say I'm going to print whatever gets passed that many times, what would I put in this method? Or maybe I won't call it times because that might be weird. All right, how about we call it number? Repetition? Reps. I like reps. That's better. Okay. All right, so what would we do here?
How many times do you want to print it?
Reps times.
Rep start times space 2.
Uh-huh.
And
Yep. And then end.
comma.
Yep, and I have to change the way I'm calling it. Yep. And what do I need to change? What do I need to put in here in my method call?
Gonna do comma space number.
A number, exactly. So if we say 3, for example, it'll print it 3 times.
Yep.
Wonder how many times you could print it.
I'm sure you could print it a lot of times.
It was down from 500 million.
Yeah, no, that's so much. Sure, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, is that clear for everybody what we did there? Okay. So does everybody feel comfortable with how, is anybody, look at this, this one is to write a method called greet that takes a name, and we say puts greet in the name, it would print out hello, name, exclamation point. So let's, does somebody want to do this one?
So we need.
Do you want to do this one? Yeah? Yeah, do you want to do this one,
We
Vic?
need it inside.
Or do you want to walk me through?
So don't you need
So we're going to have a def greet that takes a name, and we're going to call it like this. What do we call it? Puts greet Ada. And our expectation is that it's going to print out. Let's put a hash there. That it's going to print out hello Ada exclamation point. Okay. Yeah. So what do we need to do here? Do we need a puts? Look at the way we're calling the method. Yeah.
We need to establish name.
It's being pulled in parentheses at the bottom right.
Yes. So we've got Ada
What
coming
part
in
of the
here.
green bit is not in that method?
That's
The
right.
hello.
So how do we get that into the method?
You give it a string.
Yeah. So do we want to give it? We can give it a variable name if you want.
So like name.
Maybe not name, but maybe like greeting.
Greeting.
Oh, okay.
And then you'd put, give it a string. So you'd go.
A quote. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
And a space, and then your exclamation, and then you do a hash.
Yes.
And then you put curly brackets in there.
Yes. And what? Yes. And what is that called? Yes.
Yeah. And then you put your exclamation.
Yes. That's it. Now, like I said before, we don't have to explicitly return this, but I would explicitly return it. Does that make sense? I would explicitly return it. You don't have to, but I would. And there we go. Was that clear for everyone else? Great job, Vic. Thank you. Any questions about that? And we already looked at multiple parameters, didn't we? So we can pass as many parameters as we want, and inside of the method, we need to refer to those parameters by the name that we give in the method declaration. Okay? So I would encourage you, so who heard Matthew talk about coding in English Friday night? You got to hear that. Yeah, so you should use parameter names that describe what they represent. So that when you read this code out, puts A plus B, it is more meaningful than puts A plus B. Right? So I do avoid using single character variable names. The only exception to that for me is when I have an indexing loop. When I have an indexing loop, a lot of times I use I for that index variable, and that's just such a well-established convention, I think, in programming. You'll see it all the time. Yes,
What
Ian?
about when you're like doing a pattern inside a function?
When you're doing a turn, are you talking about variable names? Yeah, so I would still, an attorney, I wouldn't make the names super long, but I would make them descriptive still, I would make them descriptive. Okay. All right, so if we wanted to write a program that combined a first name and last name inside of a method called full name. So it's going to take a first name and last name as parameters and output the full name. All right. So somebody else walk me through this one. What do I need to do? So we have a method called full name. Should be full underscore name though, because this is Ruby. Full name, and it takes as parameters a first name and a last name. And then it outputs or returns. We could output, we could print it, or we could return it. I like the idea of returning it. A full name. Okay, so what do we need? Def. Full name. Yep.
The first name and last name.
Yep. Yep.
So, are we doing a time loop in this, or?
Do we need a loop?
Well, it wants us to print it 3 times, so we can do.
Oh, we're going to do that from the outside though. Yes.
Um,
So this method is just going to return a full name. So it should be like first name space last name is what I would want, right?
Return
Yeah?
string, and then just in calculation first name, last name.
First name.
The string.
And then, oops, yep. I don't know what happened there. My cursor jumped to the wrong place. First name, we'll put a space there, like that.
Yep.
That should do it. And so let's test it by calling it with 3 different names. And if we're just returning it, then we'll call it with a puts, won't we? Yeah? Does anybody know Pixel? Any other Heinlein fans in the room? No? Just me? Okay. Anybody else? Give me a name.
Leo.
Huh?
Leo.
Leo.
Leo, right.
All right. So if we run it, there we go. All right, any questions about that? So we're passing 2 parameters. We're using those 2 parameters inside of our method to do something. And then when we call the method, we pass those input parameters to our method. Okay? So we use the return keyword, and we know that Ruby will return the value of the last expression if we don't use the return keyword, but please just use the return keyword. I mean, I'm not going to take points off if you don't, but I'm just telling you, save yourself sadness later and just use the return keyword. And we also know that a return, like we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the morning challenge, a return exits the method. At that line, we exit the method. It doesn't matter how many things are after that. So if I write a method, let's say after this I said, puts hi, you, is that line ever going to execute? Ever?
Which one?
Hi, you. Puts hi you inside the method. Is it ever going to execute that line?
Nope.
Never.
Ah.
It's never going to execute that line. I'd never get there.
You'd have to have it up there in the string.
Well, I have to have it before the return statement.
Yeah.
When we hit that return statement, we leave the method and ignore everything else in it.
Does it even read these puts in, like, when it's reading the code, like running it, will it even read the puts I use?
It doesn't. So Ruby, I believe, okay, Ruby, it sees a method declaration, it jumps to the end. When it executes the code, it would execute that first line and that return would send it out. I don't think it would ever get to that line.
So you could run you could just put like a entire book in that string, and you could just run it, and it just wouldn't.
It just wouldn't even execute it.
So
And that would be bad because then people would be so confused about your code.
Would it slow it down at all? Right?
I don't think it would slow it down. Okay, so if we wanted to write a method that converts a distance, which is passed in as a number, from miles to kilometers, rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is the formula that converts from miles to kilometers. That's one thing we're going to have to know, isn't it? Another thing we're going to have to know is how do we round something to 2 decimal places? Yeah.
1 mile, 1.6 kilometers.
Yes, but I would want, okay, I'm pretty sure that that's true. I'm terrible with memorizing conversions. So if we had def miles to kilometers, RES, spelled the weird way.
Yeah, TRES.
And we're going to pass in miles. And we're going to return kilometers. But we have to define that. Okay, so what is kilometers?
Kilometers 1,000 meters.
Somebody look up the formula for me and tell me.
From 1 kilometer equals 1.60. No, 1.
1.63. 1.63, I thought.
So do I say miles times, somebody just look up the formula. It's like miles times 8/5 or something.
Yes, it is 8/5.
Is it?
Yes.
Divide.
That's what my...
Dude, it says
It's like
To
this?
go from kilometers to...
No, miles to kilometers.
You could,
the formula
I
is
had that up.
divide the length by value 1.609.
Okay,
Multiply by
that's
1.6.
Oh, that's
Exactly. Per month.
Multiply by 1.63?
1.63.
Yeah, that's what we did. That's what I
Okay.
said.
Now,
0.9.
if I multiply by 1.63, the benefit here is that if miles comes in as an integer, because I'm multiplying it by a float, it will give me a float back, which is good. If I did times 8 divided by 5, I'd get an integer unless I cast miles to float or cast 8 divided by 5 to float. I'd have to cast a float unless miles comes in as a float. So that's a benefit of using a decimal. Yes?
How do you specify how many decimal points?
Yeah, that's a great question. In Ruby, it's a little bit tricky. You have to use some string formatting. So we could use, there is a round method, but the problem with the round method is that if it's less than 2 decimal places, it won't give you 2 decimal places. It'll give you 1 decimal place.
Can you just do percentage dot 2f?
You can. Not so it's percentage, the number 2, dot 2f. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So do you want to walk me through the syntax for that?
No, I can't.
So, don't you put percentage to
Yeah?
2f, and then outside of the equation
Yes.
to have a percentage sign?
Yes. 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 Now, this is going to return what kind of data type?
An integer.
Nope.
Flow.
Nope.
Oh, a string.
A string.
Yes.
Why?
You've given it a string.
Yes, I'm formatting it to a string. Let's just see if it works first. And we're going to have to put it, aren't we? Yeah, that's what I meant. Thanks. All right. So, it did do what we want. It gave me 2 decimal places, even though it's 0.3. So if I didn't do that string formatting, it would have just given me 0.3. If I actually wanted it to return a number, though, so if I do this, if I puts miles.kilometers10.class, what is that going to do? What is that going to tell me? Anybody? Fast track or Gentech? What will that tell me?
What was the question? Yes.
If I say puts miles to kilometers 10.class, what is that going to print?
It's going to tell me the method. It's going to tell me the method is a class.
It's not so, almost, not quite. What does miles to kilometers 10 return right now?
A string.
A string. String.class. We'll run it.
It's just going to tell you what it is.
So what I'm doing this for is to see what is the data type of that return. It's a string. What if I want it to return a float?
Would you have to go kilometers to integer?
Can anybody tell me what I have to do here?
The whole in brackets and then do that.
Yeah. Let's see if that does it. Hey. Nice. Okay, let's make sure it prints what we want. It's just saying that I want this whole thing.
Yeah, if you put it in brackets, it would just 2 after kilometers instead of calling it on the variable itself. So the whole in brackets.
Oh, but look what it did. It took away my formatting. Sad face. Sad face.
It takes away your formatting because you've got to have the string.
Sad face.
Parameters. No?
Yeah.
Have you got to have the string outside the parameters?
No, it's just that I can't have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Sad face. So, in Ruby, if you want to format with 2 decimal places, you have to deal with it as a string. If you then wanted to do some math with this thing, you'd have to turn it into a number to do the math with it, and then you could reformat it back into a string with 2 decimal places. Okay? So things to know about Ruby. Okay. Any questions about that example?
If
Yeah.
you were adjusting it throughout, like
Yeah.
for example, they're making it, you'd print it as the string,
Yes.
and then you'd adjust it make your changes.
Yes.
On adjust it.
And what I would do is I would have a method that converts it to a
Yeah.
string, right?
That was my next question.
Yes.
Would you run that 2-3 methods?
Yes, I would just have like a method that says, convert to string. I would probably just have it convert to string because you need that formatting in it. Because what if later you decide, I want to format it differently? Then you'd only have to change that formatting in one place.
Yeah.
Like maybe you wanted to put a $sign in front of it. Maybe other time, at first you didn't put a $sign. So yeah, I would put anything like that in a method, and I would call that method when I wanted that formatting. Oh, we were supposed to put KM after it. So let me show you this. Look at this. This is pretty cool too. So the slide actually said to put KM after it, like this. And it actually wanted us to say, what did it want us to say? Number of miles. So how would we write the number of miles? Like this is. Now here's the other thing to know about this formatting. I don't have to have, I can have stuff before and after that, okay? And what comes after the percent is the thing that's going to be formatted with that formatting string. So I can put words around that like I just did here. So this actually prints nice. Yeah. So that formatting is like a placeholder for the number that I put after the percent outside of the string. And it'll format that value in the placeholder according to the formatting that I specify with the formatting string. In this case, .2f, which says is the formatting string for a floating point with 2 decimal places. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? What I did there? Is that clear? Any questions? Don't get too hung up on the string formatting. You can always look it up later if you have to. Okay, but string formatting is something that we do a lot as programmers, to create a string either for a user to look at or for us to consume from another part of our program, data in a particular format.
Janelle,
Yes?
is the percent in that string essentially the same as interpolation?
It's similar. It's not exactly the same as interpolation, but it's similar. What it does is it specifies a formatting for a number, in this case, for a number. It doesn't have to be. If you look up string formatting Ruby, you'll see all the different possibilities for formatters. Number F is one possibility for formatting decimals to indicate how many places you want it to show. And there are others. So it is, it's related specifically to string formatting and not exactly interpolation. But it does have a similar result in that we substitute in what goes after that percent, right? But the syntax is very different, isn't it? We put the variable outside of the string with a percent sign between the string and the variable. So the syntax is very different. But it does have a similar result. All right, so if we had code like this, so what does this code look like? What is it doing?
Oh, wow. Oh, it's a recipe.
It's a recipe
Well done.
for how to cook spaghetti and how to cook rice. Now, how could we, there's nothing essentially wrong with this code. It's okay. But there is an opportunity here to make it drier. Even code as simple as this, we can make it drier. So, somebody give me a way we can make it drier.
Just take spaghetti and the amount of minutes, or the food and the amount of minutes.
Mm.
that through a method?
We could, because otherwise they're the same, aren't they? Fill a saucepan with water, place the saucepan on the stove, bring saucepan to boil. We can fix that typo. Add whatever ingredient and cook for whatever amount of time.
Is that an example of making one mistake? You have
Yes.
to change it in both.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'm sure that's completely intended.
Good eye, though.
Everything.
Okay, so let's create a method. What do we call this method? Maybe
Prep.
boil something. Boil.
What about cook?
It could be cook. Cook's almost too generic though. So we're really talking about like boiling stuff in water. We could just call it boil. Should we just call it boil? Okay. And what parameters do we need again, Carl?
Food and time.
Yeah. All right. So then what do we put inside of here?
You can put more of that.
Okay, so let's take, shall I take one of these and substitute? Is that the way you would do it? All right, so what do I have to change here?
You have to take the L out of saucepan on line 7.
You gotta take spaghetti out.
Yeah.
And replace it with calculation of food. And then you also have to do that with pasta.
Here?
And then 9 minutes, you have to replace it with time and calculation.
Like this? Already following that? Like this? And then I would replace all of this with, how would I call this method?
You want to do boil,
Uh-huh.
bacon bracket, spaghetti,
We'll say pasta because it's easier to type.
pasta,
9
and
minutes.
Yeah. I can't remember how long rice was. 15?
15.
Okay.
You
Okay.
have to put spaces in between the comma and the... or is
Don't
that
have
just
to.
Convention.
Um,
'Cause it's-
does it automatically
It doesn't matter if you do or not. I think if you look, has anybody looked at that Airbnb style guide that I sent a link to? Have a look at that. Okay, I think I put it in resources. Somebody tell me if I'm wrong. But it gives you the conventions, some really good conventions for Ruby code, including things about spacing and variable naming and stuff like that. All right, let's see if this works. Nice. Okay, there's something else that I would do. Can anybody guess what my crazy brain would do in addition to this?
You have 20 years of experience. With
Yeah, no, it has nothing
Well,
to do with that.
you maybe could have a header,
Yeah,
and you could have
yeah.
instructions or something.
I would like to have a header because what if I decided that those dashes, as fancy as they are, that maybe, it wasn't very accessible. Maybe some people have a hard time seeing the dashes or something. And I wanted to change that. And maybe I wanted to colorize it. Maybe I want to change it, have it different colors for different uses or something like that. That just looks like an opportunity for me where there's like that header kind of thing to create another method.
You're talking about...
This bit here. Yeah.
You're talking about string formatting before.
Yes.
Is there a way to format that to be underlined? How to put
We could probably use Unicode characters or something. We could just use underlines instead of dashes, but I'm sure that there's like a Unicode character or something, some kind of ASCII character thing we could do. But what if I just for the moment, if I said like def just header, yeah. And what do I want to pass into it? I could pass the food in, or I could just print the bars. But since it's the same in both, how to cook, I could just not pass anything and just have it puts. this bit.
But does it make it reusable?
But then I'll have to call header twice. It does make it reusable because, then I could call header anywhere I wanted that, but it's a little bit, I think I would put the whole thing in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so in which case I would have to pass it, if I wanted it to do this whole bit, what do I have to do here? You could, yeah, like this, you mean? That's fine.
More clear.
That's fine too. And now, what do I have to do here? What happens now if I run it? So how do I fix that? What happened? Yeah, I sure can. Now, how do I need to call it?
Aiden was saying it, you just couldn't hear him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Aiden's very quiet. How do I need to call it, Aiden? What do I need to pass to it? Exactly what I want to pass, right? Because that's the variable holding that piece of information, which is the thing that I'm giving a recipe for, right? Is food. So now you can see I can pass that piece of information. That piece of information is right here. That's where I declare that piece of information. And then I pass it into boil when I call boil, and it comes in as food. And then I can pass that same piece of information to another method, header. And it comes into header as title. But it's the same piece of information. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it doesn't matter what I call it. In my method declaration, I can call it something different. As long as what I refer to inside of the method matches the parameter name passed to that method. That's what's important. Is that clear for everybody? Is everybody following along with that? If it's not clear, then let me know. We can talk about it some more. We can demonstrate it. So now let's just make sure it runs the way we expect it to. Look at that. Now again, what are the benefits of this?
In a bigger project, it would be more beneficial, but in this case, it looks like we just use more lines of code now.
It does look like we use more lines of code. It's probably not too many more though, because we did have that whole thing printed up, specified twice. But say, for example, we put this product out, and then there were a lot of people who were like, saucepan? What is a saucepan? I don't understand what a saucepan is. Why did they say saucepan? We decided we wanted to change that. Or say we want to translate this into other languages. Then there are half as many places we have to make the changes to those words.
You can just right-click and go change the instance. Which is dangerous.
Yeah, it is dangerous. So this allows us, now we've isolated this code to this method. And if we want to make any changes to that code, we can make the changes right there. And it's going to be updated for anybody who calls this method. Yeah? It's a trivial example, but the concepts are the same regardless, right? When you have a really large project, you'll find that there's, especially sort of like utility methods that are doing something like formatting a string or doing a conversion from one type to another, that you will have to call multiple times, and you'll want that to be in one place. All right, so there are a couple of resources there that you can look at, and let's just have a quick look at the afternoon challenge and see if I like it. Okay, this is pretty simple, but here we have some broken code. So have a go with this challenge, okay? And then what we're gonna do after lunch, I'll give you like 30 minutes or so to do this, and then I'm gonna put a challenge up on the whiteboard, and we're gonna pair program, okay? Something that's a bit more challenging that has to do with methods. And we'll do some pair programming this afternoon. All right? Cool? Cool. All right, so it's 12:10. Let's come back at 1:15.